The first one was probably also the most surprising to me, that some people prefer to memorize stuff, like the company's mission, the company's principles, and even answers to behavioral questions for an on-site interview. In my opinion, this never flies. And in my experience, this never worked as an efficient way to properly prepare for an interview. The correct way to do this is to understand the behavior behind, the story behind that specific concept. And of course, if you read a company's mission 10 times, you will inevitably memorize parts of it, but the approach is what matters. So understand the story behind. Next one is about taking advice. Like, there's a tendency for some to take any and all advice for granted. And in today's economy, in today's digital world, this will never work, because while I'm very well intentioned and I always try to give you the best advice that I have, it's inevitable that my advice will not work for any and all candidates applying for any and all roles for any and all companies. So you should be able to filter out this information and take only what works, what improves your experience for that specific interview. So, for example, if I tell you that the more concise answers I've heard are around 2 minutes long, it doesn't mean that you should never go beyond that limit, not by far. You could have a great answer that's 8 or 10 minutes long if there's something simply engaging and something really relevant and worthwhile talking about. So this is what I mean by works for you. Or another great example here would be for Amazon. Jeff Bezos said in some interview that they outlawed PowerPoint presentation at Amazon, which is correct as a policy. But throughout my experience working with candidates there, I've noticed that Amazon even shares PowerPoint slides as templates for some presentation, and they have PowerPoint documents. So you should make a clear difference on what works for you and what matters to you for a specific interview. Another dangerous approach here is to prepare answers to as many questions as you can versus preparing only a couple, maybe a dozen answers, and focus on the quality of those specific answers. Now, the first approach is the reactive approach, and the second approach is the more proactive approach. So needless to say that the second one is the recommended one that will give you the highest possible quality. So the quality of your answers is one of the main elements in a successful interview. So focus on answering questions related to only the behaviors you're interested in, and try to find the best possible answers to those questions. A well-known approach to improve your behavioral interviewing skills is to prepare stories, the most relevant stories from your career, to eventually develop from then onwards towards great answers to whatever question you're being asked. However, there's also certain thresholds here, and I've noticed that people who prepare only 5 stories for such interviews will inevitably spin over those stories over and over again, and inevitably be spotted as either not preparing, either not having enough experience for that role. So if you prepare those stories, make sure you prepare closer to 20 such stories. Like, probably you could get away with 15 for more junior roles, but try to prepare enough stories to show as a diverse experience that I'm sure you have, even if you're a recent graduate. I've noticed that one of the favorite methods to burn time while preparing for an interview is to actually prepare a new version of your CV. Or on the same note, or watching a video with Jeff Bezos. Now, needless to say that this information should only serve as a reference point for you in your preparation process, and ideally you should spend your time disconnected from all these distractions, after all, while preparing for these interviews. So keep in mind that the journey inside is a lot broader than the journey outside. So it's, you should self-reflect a lot, and you should focus towards on producing content for an interview rather than consuming it. Something that you should really take seriously here is to make a self-assessment of what you cannot do well versus what you can, because there's this tendency that we do what we feel comfortable doing. And for example, in an interview, if you feel comfortable speaking and talking to people, then don't hire a coach so you showcase how well can you speak, but rather spend your time preparing the quality of your stories and try to brainstorm around the behaviors around those stories, or vice versa. If you believe you have the highest possible quality story, but you need practicing, then yes, then you should focus on the role play. But you'll be surprised how hard it is to actually self-assess on these things. And actually, I've seen in many cases that it took people days to find that one thing that they're not good at. And always try to do what's counterintuitive, what you cannot do, what you can't, is the best approach here. Now, a very valid argument is why would you prepare for weeks or months on end for just one single interview? And it's a fair statement. Like, why would this be worthwhile your time investment and your efforts after all? And the truth here is actually it is not. If you look at it as a one-time opportunity, it's not worthwhile to prepare for months on end just for this one. But if you look at this as a opportunity over the long run, and as an opportunity to develop your career and subsequently to have other interviews in which you can perform, then the equation changes here. And you should also understand that once you get good at these things, at behavioral interviewing and actually becoming a better listener in general, you'll also do better in your job, in your day-to-day job. So it's a long-term investment here. So don't look at it as a destination. You should look at it as a journey. The next point I want to touch upon here is setting goals for how prepared should you be going into an on-site interview. And there's this impression that preparing to be confident enough or preparing to be good enough is the right approach, when in my experience it's always the people that are paranoid and people who push the fucking limit. People who think 10x, they want to become 10 times better than they are right now, that actually get the job. And finally, two pieces of advice when it comes to the actual interview. In a job interview, you never listen to respond to a question, but you listen to learn why the question gets asked, because it's only then that once you understand the behavior that you're going to be able to give your best answers. And the other piece of advice here is don't try to please the interviewer, especially for a high-paying job. It's all about making sense and in a way having backbone in a job interview. So do whatever makes sense to you. And of course, you should be optimistic, but you should even be cautiously optimistic as a strategy.